Let's go ahead and get started tonight. Trust everyone's had a good day. Definitely a good service this morning. Thank God for His Spirit. His Spirit. You know, TJ also talks about the preparation that goes into a service and practicing music and all this stuff right here. But you know, if the Spirit doesn't show up, it's all in vain. It's all in vain. We've just had a production or something else. But it's God's Spirit moving that makes church church. And we anticipate the same thing tonight. If He doesn't show up, then I don't want to teach. But this time, let's go for the Lord in prayer, and just wonder if anyone has a special request or a praise item or something that they want to share. Man, there's no place like home. Any others? Let's make sure remember him. Remember that family as well. Let's be sure remember Don Gillette. Any others? Let's be sure remember him. Any others? Not all those with an unspoken request. But we'll come to the altar and ask Brother Ron if he would to lead us tonight. Sick,
The yellow one's that. Okay. Bobby asked me if I was going to sing tonight. I said, well, I don't know whether I will or not, but I was looking through some stuff and found a song, and I said, well, I guess I might sing that song. So anyway, it's one of these days, and one of these days I'll cross the river to the other side. No more heartaches, no more sorrow, no more tears. Everything will be just fine. One of these days I'll cross the river to my home on the other side, and there I'll be with Jesus forever. No more tears will dim my eyes. I have loved ones that have gone before me. There are times I miss them so, but Jesus has promised there's coming a great day when we'll meet again on that blessed shore. One of these days I'll cross the river to my home on the other side, and there I'll be with Jesus forever. No more tears will fill my eyes. In this old world, I'm just a traveler. No place of rest have I found, but something is pulling me towards that city where I'll lay my burdens down. One of these days I'll cross the river to my home on the other side, and there I'll be with Jesus forever. No more tears will fill my eyes. No more tears will fill my eyes. No more tears will fill my eyes.
Lamentations is like a eulogy delivered at a funeral. Only instead of mourning a person's passing, the death is Israel's and her temple. The lamenter mourns the destruction of his home in Israel. His language is dismal. His images are bleak. His city is dead. His people are grieved. His home is lost. So laments fill his speech. Israel had crumbled. The temple was trampled, and her people had been taken abroad. So Israel surely wondered, had they been utterly rejected by God? Lamentations offers laments to a people aghast and awed, laments that give words to the grieved, confused, and lost. But these laments also freely admit all of Israel's many sins. It was their evil that destroyed the temple. It was their filth that caused it to fall. Their transgressions brought this grief. Their uncleanliness was the cause of it all. And so they lament. They pay their respects. They bring their guilt to Israel's grave. They own their filth, admit their wrong, and wail for the death they've laid. Maybe God would hear. Maybe God would save. Maybe their words would bring them back. Maybe their city could be raised. And the answer Lamentations gives is the one that God already gave. For hundreds of years ago, Moses predicted a time when this grief would come, when Israel's guilt would cost them their home and God's time in the temple would be done. Moses wrote that Israel would sin wildly, the people would be led astray, so God would drive them out from their land, and their temple would become a grave. But through this death, their sins would be repaid. From this death, a remnant would be raised. So as the people mourned and lamented, as they wept and prayed, they wondered if Moses' words were about them. Maybe these were those predicted days. Which is why, in the middle of the laments, we hear a tiny glimpse of hope in the midst of all this pain and torment. The lamenter says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness." But then the book ends, and it ends with what sounds like an unanswered question. God will restore us as we have expected, unless we have been utterly rejected. So which one is true? That is the message at the end of Lamentations. Doubt and questioning, right next to hopeful expectations. But the people's hopes were not mistaken, for God did bring his people back. He did rebuild their temple, and yet, like Moses before, and like Lamentations, with Jesus' arrival, the laments start to experience a revival. Jesus said the temple would be destroyed again, but this time it would be final. The temple's stones would be thrown down, and they would never again receive a reprisal. But as Moses predicted, and as Lamentations relayed, through this death, their sins would be repaid. From this death, a remnant would be raised. And that's because Jesus said the true temple is himself. He would become their grief. He would be trampled and lamented. His life would be lost. Jesus himself would be utterly rejected. So, once again, like Moses, Jesus, and Lamentations, we now lament because our sin destroyed not just a building or a home or a nation. We lament because our sins killed Jesus. We are responsible for his devastation. It is our evil that destroyed God's final temple. It is our filth that caused him to fall. Our transgressions brought this grief. Our uncleanliness is the cause of it all. But now, if we lament, if we pay our respects, if we bring our guilt to Jesus' grave, if we own our filth, admit our wrong, and wail over the death we've laid, God will hear. God will save. Jesus will bring us back if Jesus is raised. For unlike Israel and her earthly temple of stone, the temple of Jesus' body was not permanently overthrown. Jesus rose from the dead so that we may know that we have an eternal home that is eternally protected. Now we can have an answer to the end of Lamentations. Because Jesus was resurrected, we will never be utterly rejected.
Well, good evening again. I hope everyone was able to, if you weren't here on Wednesday night, Brother TJ went ahead and introduced the book of Lamentations for us and did a great job. And I'm glad, because it sure makes it easier to teach when he does all the background work. But tonight we want to start off with the first chapter of Lamentations. As Brother TJ had said there Wednesday night, that this is a short book. It's five chapters laid out. The first couple have 22 verses, and it's kind of as if Jeremiah, who is not stated as the author, but about all signs point that it is Jeremiah that is the author of Lamentations. And it's kind of his way of covering everything from A to Z, if you will, okay? And I stole this slide from Wednesday night. But he said the purpose of this disobedience to God brings disastrous consequences. And God suffers with his people, okay? And then also this one was from his the other night as well. What are lamentations? Loud cried eulogies. And he said one of the things that he wanted us as we taught to bring about the personification of this, that it is a personal account. And so I thought that video did a very good job of showing at a funeral. You know, and I think about us if we were to lament over, you know, the devastation of Wise County. You know, if we were to go up on a hill somewhere and sit, you know, and we've all lamented that way. You know, you can go back to, you know, I drive by the old high school a lot. Not that I'm lamenting over the high school, but my granny used to live there, my papa. You know, and both of them passed away in that house, and so there's memories there, and it takes our heart back to special times that we had in that house and all this stuff. And that's kind of where Jeremiah's at. in this. And so this is kind of the funeral, the death of Jerusalem. And then the dirge here is kind of like some rhymes or poems or songs of Lamentations. All right. But 7:29 of Jeremiah says, cut off your hair and cast it away. Take up a lamentation on the desolate heights. For the Lord has rejected and forsaken the generation of his wrath. And then the video alluded to this, but then Brother TJ also sent this out to us that was teaching as some notes to use. But it was the warning not heard. And it comes from Joshua 23:15 and 16. It says, therefore it shall come to pass, as all good things are come upon you, which the Lord your God promised you, so shall the Lord bring upon you all evil things, until he had destroyed you from off this good land, which the Lord your God hath given you, when ye have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods, and bowed yourself to them. Then shall the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and ye shall perish quickly from off the good land which he hath given you. And that brings us to here the first lament. Now this is a picture that I found, and some scholars believe that this is where that Jeremiah wrote much of Lamentations. This is known as Jeremiah's grotto. Okay, and you can see in the background parts of Jerusalem. And then I thought when we was reading that verse and it talked about going to the hiding place of and lament. But this grotto is in Israel. It's just outside the north wall of Jerusalem. And again, where tradition says that Jeremiah wept bitter tears and composed the book of Lamentations. The grotto is under Golgotha, the same hill on which Jesus was crucified. And it's still around today. All right. So let's go ahead and jump right into Lamentations in 1 and read the first 4 verses here. It says, "O doth the city sit solitary, that was full of people, how she has become a widow, so that she was great among the nations and princes, among the provinces, how she has become a tributary. She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she hath done none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her prosecutors overlook her between the straits." And so when we look at this, I left out 4. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none have come to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. And so when you look at that, that's when I talked about if we were to go up and look over the town of Wise, or if you go and you look over some great city and how it was just a hustle and bustle and all this activity, and now there's nothing. There's nobody there. I kind of like think of the old, me being in my loving my westerns and stuff, and you got the tumbleweed rolling through the town. There's just nothing there no more. And at one time, it was kind of like the heartbeat of the area. Everything centered around this. And it talks about here in verse 4 about the gates. And the gates was kind of like the meeting place, and where people would, be introduced to what's going on, and a lot of teaching and things at the gates. And now there's nothing. And Jeremiah's heart, it's broken. Several years ago, me and Dalton went to Los Angeles. And so I guess if we looked at a big city, Los Angeles, the hustle and bustle, and just one day, it was actually one evening, about 7 o'clock, Logan called me and said, "Where you at?" I said, "I have no idea." And so somehow or another on his phone, Find My Friends, this was me. Now I know you all can't see this, but this is Melrose Avenue. Down here is Beverly Hills. and me and Dalton are somewhere on that street. And you think about, there's a lot going on there. And I said, well, where are you at? And he sent me this. This is Turkey Branch. There's nobody anywhere. Logan's right there. And I kind of thought of that when we look at Jeremiah. Jeremiah probably, at one point in time, Jerusalem would be equivalent to our Los Angeles minus the corruption. But as far as the hustle and bustle and the people moving in and moving out, and then to go and feel like you're the only person there, that you don't see much going on now. These great temples, these great statues, all this great, designs and buildings are crumbled. They're falling around. They've not been used in forever. So they're either, falling apart or they're tarnished, and they're blowed over with dirt and everything else. And he's weeping because of what he sees. And then he goes on, and you'll notice here, and I got this later on in here, but this is when you go through here, and the personification of it, I went back and counted. In the first 12 verses of it is, you'll see him use the word her or she 50 times. And I thought about that with us. When we, God bless America, stand beside her and guide her, and how that we pay tribute to America, Lady Liberty, and all this. And I think about all the messages that we've heard of the warning, of the sin, of the destruction, of the judgment. And here's Jeremiah, who has warned, who has been scorned and mocked and ridiculed for his prophecies for 40-some years to this place, and now it's happened. And it would be the same as, having a loved one that maybe you had a burden for, and that you prayed for and you witnessed to, and they passed, and you don't know for sure if they ever made it right with the Lord. You would search and you would find and you would look for comfort, but there's none for sure that you can find. And that's where Jeremiah is at here. He gave these warnings, and they didn't heed them. They allowed these foreign gods to come in. They turned their back, and as a result of that, then when Zedekiah wasn't paying the taxes no more, then boom, here it comes. Destruction. And again, it's a mighty city. Fortified walls, look at us, look at all these things we've accomplished. Well, just look around. Who would ever take over us? But God had given the warnings through Jeremiah to the people, and they did not heed them. And now his heart is broken because all these warnings that he gave them has come about. All right? Does anybody have anything? And again, he's very detailed in this, of this silence. And it's one thing to be lonely. It's another thing to be lonely in silence. And so he's very descriptive in how that he gives these words of, that there's nobody there no more and all these things. Okay? Verse 5 says, her adversaries are the chief. Her enemies prosper. For the Lord hath afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children are gone into captivity before the enemy. And so again, if you looked at it as a eulogy and it's the death of a city, but when you start looking at it from a personal aspect, maybe you would think, well, it would be better off if the family was dead, but now they're enslaved and gone to places I don't know where they're at. What kind of life are they having to live now? What kind of hardships are they having to face? Because it wasn't like they just came in. The city's destroyed. A lot of the people died in the invasion, but a lot of the people were taken are now serving. The family has been broken up and scattered everywhere and have become slaves. Verse 6, it says, from the daughter of Zion, all her beauty is departed. Her princes are become like harts that find no pasture, and they are gone without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembered in the days of her affliction and of her miseries all the pleasant things that she had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy, and none did help her. Her adversaries saw her and did mock at her Sabbaths. Okay, and again, Jerusalem's known for her temples. All right, and now the enemies. You know, and I think about one of the things I was thinking about too when we were studying this was think about the church. And yes, this is just a building, but to me, it's a very special building. It was a special building when we was over here. It was a very special building when we was over there. It's a very special building when we're here, because in that it ties in all these memories. How sad would it be one day when we drove by here and this was now the Moose Lodge, or it was just a building, or if it was a dilapidated building that's fallen apart. And you would think, I remember, and it would spark memories of when this was a growing and a thriving church. And I thought about, the warnings that Brother TJ has heeded over the years. Before him, Tommy, and before him, Randy, even though I wasn't here necessarily during that time phrase. I wasn't dating Randy's daughters. But during all this time, all these warnings about making sure that we as a church are this, and we're staying centered on this, and we're spending the time on our knees and all this stuff here, and how devastating it would be when we finally say, we didn't heed the warnings, now look. And I just throw that out there because in my mind, when he started talking about the temples and stuff, for a prophet, much of his teaching is going to be in those temples. And now to see them destroyed, and as if the enemy, they didn't heed the very things that I was warning them about, now has taken control of their lives. When there was a much better way that was offered, but they didn't take it. They didn't heed the warnings. And even though this is a very short 5 chapters of the Bible and very sad, there's not a whole lot of sermons that I've heard over the years out of the book of Lamentations. Why? Well, because as Brother TJ mentioned this morning, it's probably not going to fill the churches up. But guess what? Let's read some good uplifting eulogies this morning, But in our own personal life and in the lives of Christians, we can see, of the lost rather, we can see these warnings and how just like Jerusalem, in our own life, even as Christians, if we don't heed the warnings of God, judgment's coming. It could be through wrath or whatever. So there has to be some attention to detail. It says, Jerusalem has grievously sinned, therefore is she removed from all that honored and despised her, and her despised her, because they have seen her nakedness. Yea, she sigheth and turneth backward. And so again, when we start looking at these, why has the city fallen? Jeremiah here will make 2 statements to help explain. Number 1, she's fallen because of her sin. Her sin is the reason she fell. It's not that in a lot of questions, and a lot of skeptics today, a lot of atheists would be like, well, who would want to serve a God who would do this, and this? Look at all, they'll go back through the Crusades and the Holy Wars and all this stuff here and say, what kind of God of, love, why would he allow these things? Because he said from the very beginning, when Adam and Eve sinned, again, it's full circle. God created a perfect world. When it's all finished, it'll be a perfect world again. He'll restore that. But because of man's sin, there became separation. And because of the separation, there was a price to be paid. There was judgments to come. Sin has consequences. And Jeremiah is saying right here, because sin has consequences, I understand why my beloved city is in the shape that it's in. We can look today, and ouch and amen to me, That needs to be the heart to which we look around the world and say, we're in the shape we're in because of the sin that we allow. It's so much easier to look and say, they. But it's still we. It's still we, because there's still a point of, God still offers a bridge of hope for those people to be made right before it's too late. So this is the first explanation of the fall, which is her sin. Verse 9, it says, her filthiness is in her skirts. She remembereth not her last end. Therefore she came down wonderfully. She had no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy hath magnified himself. The adversary hath spread out his hand upon all her pleasant things. For she has seen that the heathen entered into her sanctuary, whom thou didst command, that they should not enter into the congregation. All her people sigh, they seek bread. They have given their pleasant things for meat to relieve their soul. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am become vile. So he sees here now people taking your most prized possession just to find some bread to eat, when once it was plentiful. There was things everywhere. It is nothing to you all, ye that pass by. Behold and see, if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord has afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. And so again, Jeremiah has given the eyewitness account. He's seen it on both sides. One of the important things, I think, for the church today is that we have to make sure that we are preaching morality. We are preaching judgment. We are preaching wrath and God's judgment as well, because we live in a world that doesn't talk those things. And so kids born into the world today, this is all they know. This is all they know. But we, like Jeremiah, kind of remember a little bit more of the glory days, if you will, where there was more morality, where there was a right and wrong, where truth was expected. There wasn't so much decay. And that's what Jeremiah's saying right here. It breaks his heart because he remembers. It's not like he just came to Jerusalem and saw this and read about what a great city it once was. He said, I remember. I was there during the thriving years. I was there during all the blessings. And now I'm seeing all these cursings. And it breaks his heart. It breaks his heart. And as other people go into other chapters in the Bible, and Brother TJ pointed that out as well in chapter 3, we get a little bit of the good out of this. Okay? So the second part, we're getting ready to see it here, which is Jerusalem's sorrow. Okay? So as I said before, Jeremiah's sorrow was through the first 11 verses, and he used she or her 50 times. Here he's going to start talking about it from the person of Jerusalem. Okay? Now Jerusalem, instead of it being Jeremiah writing and said she's done this, and her cities are this, and her walls are this, and all this stuff. Now it's going to be Jerusalem talking and saying me, my, I. And you'll see that 39 times. Also, if you've noticed, some of the verses on the board here have been highlighted. Verses 5, 8, 18, and 20 all showed God's judgment as well in that. Okay? And so I thought it was neat how Jeremiah kindly weaves this in and all these lamentations and telling how, bad things are and how his heart's breaking, but still in the middle of that, he's saying, but God, every bit of this is right. You told us, you warned us, this is all part of your plan because you told us this is the way it would be. All right? Verse 13 says, from above hath he sent fire into my bones. So now this is Jerusalem talking, or from the context of Jerusalem talking. And it prevaileth against them. He hath spread a net for my feet. He hath turned me back. He hath made me desolate and faint all the day. The yoke of my transgression is bound by his hand. They that withereth and come up upon my neck. He hath made my strength to fall. The Lord hath delivered me into their hands, from whom I am not able to rise up. The Lord hath trodden under foot all my mighty men in the midst of me. He hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. For these things I weep. Mine eye runneth down with water, because the Comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. My children are desolate, because the enemy prevailed. So again, out of this here, we're starting to see that, these mighty men that was in, they're no longer able to rise. Before, they was able to rise up. They was able to conquer. They was able to do these great things. And then when he starts talking about the pride, the virgin, the pride, the morality of the city, the purity, if you will, of that city has been grounded up. There's nothing pure left within. And he's given the account of, they've had destruction in the past, but they was able to rise up and overcome it. And it says, and now it's hopeless. There's no, our mighty men are not able to do anything. The morality, the purity of our city has vanished from among us. Verse 17, Zion spreadeth forth her hand, and there is none to comfort her. The Lord hath commanded concerning Jacob that his adversaries should be round about him. Jerusalem is as a menstruous woman among them. The Lord, and this is another judgment here, the Lord is righteous, for I have rebelled against his commandment. Hear, I pray you, all people, and behold my sorrow, my virgin, and my young men are gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and my elders gave up the ghost in the city, while they sought their meat to relieve their souls. So again, everything has been taken away. All these people in Jerusalem was a business center. A lot of people came in, a lot of people came out. A lot of people had ties into the city of Jerusalem. They used her for what she was. But now in her time of need, there's no one to help. Okay? And Jeremiah says that, at this time of destruction, I searched and none could be found. There's nobody to help. Okay? So again, part of the lamenting process of just, I can imagine him holding his head and pulling his hair out and saying, this is it. I've searched for answers and I can find none. So again, the second statement that Jeremiah made, the first was in verse 8. We said because of their sin, but verse 18 here, the second explanation is the Lord is righteous. God did it, and he was right when he did. And that's hard. That is hard because we love to use the statements of, well, if God was love, why did he let this happen? If God is just, why did this take place? Why did I lose this one? Why did they have to go through this? Why did this family fall apart? Well, whatever. And Jeremiah sums it up right here for us all. God is righteous, and he owes us nothing. He owes us nothing. The breath that we have in our lungs, if it was all gone tomorrow, we've lived long enough, we've tasted enough of his grace to make it right. He doesn't owe us one extra day. He'll give us extra days because of his grace, but God doesn't owe us anything. I like this, and Brother TJ talked about J. Vernon McGee, and I love to read his stuff, but I really love to listen to him. He's your grandpa sitting over there with bad grammar. I think me and him relate a lot. But anyway, in the study of Lamentations, he gives this quote. It's from G. Campbell Morgan. It says, of the revelation of God's anger, he said, this is the supreme necessity in the interest of the universe. Prisons are in the interest of the free. Hell is the safeguard of heaven. A state that cannot punish crime is doomed, and a God who tolerates evil is not good. Deny me my biblical revelation of the anger of God, and I am insecure about this universe. But reveal to me this throne established, occupied one whose heart is full of tenderness, whose bowels yearns with love, then I'm assured that he will not tolerate that which blights and blasts and damns, but will destroy it and all its instruments and the interest that which so high and noble are pure and pure. And so when you look at that, you think about it from a garden standpoint and how you will go out to defend the things that's in your garden. You know, whether it's a tomato plant. If you say, I really love that tomato plant is just so important to me, then you got to prune it. You know, you got to prop it up. You know, there's part of it that has to be taken away. Why? So it's going to produce the most abundant fruit that it can produce. And that's what he's saying in this statement right here. A God who's just going to sit back and allow everything to happen and tolerate the things that are evil in the world, very insecure about that universe. I want a God. I don't want God's judgment, but I want God's judgment, if that makes sense. You know, we don't physically want to experience those things, but we want to make sure that God's still on his throne and he's doing what's right, okay? But we don't like, again, when we are the subject of God's wrath or judgment. You know, we'd rather learn from other people's mistakes. But guess what? We're going to learn from our mistakes as well, or at least we're supposed to. And then he finishes with this. Behold, O Lord, for I am in distress. My bowels are troubled. My heart is turned within me. For I have grievously rebelled. Abroad the sword bereaveth. At home there is as death. They have heard that I sigh. There is none to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They are glad that thou hast done it. Thou wilt bring the day that thou hast called, and they shall be like unto me. Let all their wickedness come before thee, and do unto them as thou hast done unto me, for all my transgressions. For my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. So Jeremiah here, in the middle of all this stuff, he's also seeking comfort and can't find any. He can't find any. There's no one. And you know, and Brother TJ did a great job of talking about the weeping prophet, you know, and having the heart of a woman and all. You know, and I don't know that any of us, I'm sure that there's a lot in here who's went through a lot more devastation than I have in my life. But it is so comforting to have some comfort during those devastating times. Whether it's somebody just putting their arm around you and say, I'm praying for you, I love you, or whatever else. But Jeremiah here he's talking about, you know, that his very gut, his bowels ache, his heart. Nothing's right within him is what he's saying. His heart's turned. Nothing's right within me. And you know, that within itself is bad, but then the fact that nobody is here to comfort me, that makes it even worse. That makes it even worse. And I like the end of that video that I showed because, you know, again, I like the uplifting stuff. And to end on that, be like, okay, we'll see you Sunday. Have a great day. You know, we in the modern era, the New Testament church, we know. We know what Christ is going to come back, and we know what he's going to do. We know that he raised that remnant, his son Jesus, and that we have hope. He is our hope. So what's the application? Number one, suffering is not always punishment. Now, in this case, it was punishment. Jeremiah states that. We've sinned, here's the judgments of God. But in your life, know this. Every time you go through a bad day, every time you go through something you feel like you're being punished for, it may or may not be directly related to sin. Okay? God does allow miserable consequences. We just read 22 verses of it for sinful choices. It does not mean that every suffering person is been punished. Sometimes God allows suffering to strengthen our resolve. Again, I don't know that there's any suffering that's any worse at my age to go in the gym and decide I'm going to work out again. My elbow feels like it's going to shoot out of the skin. I hurt. And to go run and my lungs, I feel like I'm just like they're bleeding from within when I run anymore. It hurts. But guess what? I need to go through those things to reach what I want to reach. Well, what I think I want to reach. Of being more healthy. And that's the same thing here. Sometimes we got to go through the hardships, the grit of it, the laborsome of planting the garden to reap the benefits of the harvest. Same thing in our life as well. We're going to go through things, but sometimes God's just trying to build our resolve. Saying, hey, you've had it pretty easy for a while. You got to toughen up. You get a little comfortable. Sometimes it's to shake us out of our complacency. I made that comment the other day when we was up here practicing singing and stuff. And it was amazed how wow, people started showing up. And and I thought this morning was awesome and all that stuff there. And I said, we've all got a little complacency over the last several years. You show up and you expect this, and this, and this, and voila. And it's the same thing with our pastor here. May we never grow complacent with him and just expect that every Sunday morning God's going to send us messages like we get and we got this morning. We have to pray. We have to support. We have to, admonish. We have to build him up. We have to make him know that we need him here. We want him here. Because the same thing with, anything else here, sometimes we can go through those hardships because we become complacent. We expect it always to be, a certain way. Help us to empathize with others. I don't want nobody who's lived in a palace, who's never gone through anything. For them, the bad day is if they lost, a couple $1,000s, but they made $60,000 the next day. I don't feel real sorry for them, okay? I want somebody who's gone through what I've been through. I want somebody to say, hey, it's going to be okay. Let me tell you my story. And that's the reason why sometimes when we go through things, we go through some tests. Why? God's given us a testimony that we need to be sharing. So not all suffering is a result of punishment. God walks through the suffering with us, okay? Psalms 23, 4 and 6, very familiar verses. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because he's right there with me. Second part that Brother TJ put on the introduction to this. Sin has its consequences, and they can be very devastating. But when we're suffering, God will go through it with us. Thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy, talked about this morning as well, shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Why? Because no longer are we serving some man-made temple that was the apple of the eye of the community. But it's Jesus. Okay? Jesus. That is the house. We're going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And then finally here, God will reward us for the suffering we endure for his sake. Matthew 5 and 10 says, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, we can't say that over Jerusalem. Okay? Because why? They wasn't persecuted for righteousness' sake. They was persecuted for their sin. That would be woe to those who are persecuted for their sin. Because it can sometimes get downright ugly. But God's going to get his point across. He's going to want to bring them to the point of salvation, of forgiveness, so that he can restore. He can't restore in the sinful state. Okay? Jerusalem had to understand that God was a God of his word before anything could be rebuilt. The same thing for us in our lives. We got to understand that there's wrath and there's judgment and there's consequences for sin. Once we understand that, then we have that contrite spirit that we can confess and God can work in our life. But as long as we're hard and don't see that we've done any wrong, his spirit won't work. Does anybody have anything? Absolutely. Man. Oh no. Yeah, absolutely. And then the fact that the enemy's cheering on through all of this. You know, and if anything that I got out of this through studying and everything else is being on guard and heed the warnings. Because Jerusalem never thought, look at the mighty city it was. I won't fall. And the same thing for us in our Christian walk. Well, I've done this, and this. I'm not what I once was. I'm not what I need to be, but I'm not what I used to be. Listen, you're still no match for the devil and his vices on your own strength. And so every day we need to heed to God's word. Every day we need to submit ourselves to him. And those are what Brother TJ just read are the same warnings that if you go back in Jeremiah that he was telling the people, guard your hearts, fortify your cities, and not necessarily the cities out, but inside. And think about it from us as a family, of that we build that ark of safety for our family. There's an old song of Build an Ark. And I used to have mixed feelings about it. I mean, it's a good song, but then I thought, well, we can't just build arks of safety for us and just we stay out here, and somebody's got to be out in the world and evangelizing and stuff like that. But we have to fortify ourselves before we can go out into the world to let our light shine. Because the world will eat you alive if you go out on your own strength, or if you go out and think, I've been at this too long, I'm too old, or whatever else. Every day, the devil wants to do to you what he allowed to happen to this city. And I mean, I know people that were once pretty strong and involved in the church and stuff like that, and you look at them now and you kind of don't recognize them. That the sin in the world has torn them apart, and you can see it. That one light that was in their eyes there's a void there, and it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing because that could still be us. It could still be us, and so we need to heed the warnings for certain. Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, listen. I agree with that as well. Tony Evans was talking about he had released like a little 6-minute stance on that, and that's what he said. Look at victories and this, that, and the other. He said, but now for the church, the responsibility, not just in abortion, but for everything that the world is trying to legalize and say is okay. What they don't tell you is that there's an internal component that throws everything out of kilter for that. That's not normal. That's not right. And the church should be ministering to that and combating what government says is okay. God says it's not okay. And just because it's legal does not mean that it's going to be soothing inside you. There's consequences to it. Yeah. No. Yeah. Well, no, but it goes back to having a controlled substance to having a controlling substance. That where it does. It'll take its effect, and it starts doing the controlling for certain. Anybody else with anything? Absolutely. Oh, yeah, them attaboys and a little salve here and there to make you feel a little better about whatever it is you're going through. I mean, it might help for a time being, but we got to realize that there are consequences, that God's word is either 100% true or it's 100% false. We don't get to pick and choose. Well, I like this part, it makes me feel better, but I don't like this part. It's judgmental. You know, there's a judgment coming, and I'd rather for God to be doing his purging of me on this side of eternity than on the other side of eternity. And you know, and I'm sure that, you know, if Jeremiah was able to reassemble everyone after all that stuff goes down, and you know, kind of like Jonah with Nineveh and getting a second opportunity in it, you know, it'd be pretty nice. I wish the warnings that were heeded to me before I turned the other direction, I wish I'd have heeded those. But my thought was, maybe somebody else, but I'll never fall that far. Absolutely. 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 Exactly. No, definitely will not happen there. And, you know, they're not only talking about the comfort, no comfort in hell, and all kinds of comfort in heaven, there'll be no excuses in either place either. Christ paid for our excuses. Yeah, this is the law, not man-made law. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And his grace will abound. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any announcements? I think Jody's Wednesday, chapter 2. More Lamentations. But hey, but when you look at it as more warnings, you know, then I like that. I like warnings because they're there to heed. And I, as I said, I would much rather read about things in the Bible that people experienced than me myself go through it, and they become personal. And I'm glad for God's warning and his judgments that we see in the Bible unfold. One, it's not going to catch us off guard here, but two, we learn from those things. We learn from those things. And as Mama said, you know, as Christians, that we, you know, we be that remnant that still, that light. You know, and the darker the world gets, the brighter our light should shine. And again, we're not ours, but we're just reflecting his light. Absolutely. Yep. He's offered us an escape plan. He's offered us an escape plan. Absolutely. Well, okay, so boxed items to take to Buchanan County. There'll be boxes out in the, or not boxed items, but items to put in a box to take to Buchanan County, and then also the Samaritan's Purse Group's going to go Saturday over there, Tuesday and Saturday, to work. Anything else? If not, then let's stand. And Brother Gilman, will you dismiss us in a word of prayer?